So today we're going to actually start a new series on how to set up a reef tank. So this will be a whole series long. So each video we're basically going to explain something different basically until we have the whole thing set up basically. And then obviously once we do have it set up and flooded, then we'll actually talk about get more and more advanced basically, because we'll literally obviously we'll have coral in here, which I already have. But we'll just slowly get more and more advanced. We'll start off with the basics and just keep going, and that's basically the plan. I don't know how long the series is going to be. I mean, I'll just take it video by video, and that is just because so the videos will be shorter, and not only that, it's more easier to comprehend one thing at a time than it is for me to explain everything in one long, like 30-minute video. So that's what we're going to do today. So the first video is going to talk about basically what tank you should get and the filtration in general. So what I have here is a Waterbox 10. Now, in my opinion, the Waterbox all-in-ones are the best all-in-ones on the market, and for somebody just starting out, an all-in-one tank is something I really recommend because basically everything's just here. The filtration is the back, nothing else you have to worry about, it's just all there. And if you don't know what an all-in-one is, basically it's just a tank that has a filtration built in the back to where there's nothing going down in the cabinet, there's nothing, it's just all in the back there. So it makes it super nice and super easy, especially if you're just getting started. It just makes the whole thing simpler. Now, there's many tanks, and when you first start out, I definitely recommend all-in-one, no matter what brand it is. But Waterbox, if you can get it, it's not that much money. I mean, a Waterbox 10 costs about $150, and that is not horrible at all for what you're getting here. The quality of glass is silicone work. The back panel is all acrylic, so it's just a really nice built tank. It's gonna last a long time. So I definitely would get something like this because honestly, you're probably gonna spend similar money on another brand that's not gonna be as good. So definitely, if you're starting out, I definitely would recommend a Waterbox. Now, you could go with the much larger tank and have a sump setup too, but that's a whole nother thing. Is if you've never done it before, then everything gets more complicated because then you're messing with protein skimmers and potentially other reactors, and so the filtration gets a little more advanced that way. So if you literally have never done a reef before, all in one is definitely my recommendation for sure. And so let's talk about size. So with reef tanks, it's definitely best to go as big as you can, especially as big as your budget can allow. Now, it's the same thing with that I say with planet aquariums and freshwater in general. Both are the same. So the reason why we want as big as possible, especially when you're first starting out, because in a larger volume of water, it is less likely that something's going to happen than something in a smaller volume of water. So for example, say if we drop, so this is 10 gallons. So say if we drop one drop of poison in this tank, well, it's going to spread, and it being so small, it's probably going to affect a lot of things very quickly because there's not much here. Well, let's say we drop a drop of venom in a 1,000-gallon tank. Well, there's so much body of water there that it's going to affect a little area, but more than likely, it's when it dispersed, it's not going to affect much because there's just so much pure water there. So that's why when you go with smaller tanks, it just gets harder and harder, especially for a reef, and especially if you're doing corals, it just gets a lot harder because it's harder to keep everything consistent, and that's what we're looking for. So the larger the tank, the more consistent everything can be, the more less likely something for to happen, because especially when you're first starting out, you're not going to know every little thing that's going to happen. You're not going to know the answers to every single solution. So having a bigger tank as possible is just going to take away those problems for the most part. Obviously, there's still things that can happen, but when there's more volume of water, there's less mistakes to happen. So that's what we recommend. So basically, my recommendation size is, of course, go as big as you can. But if I know most people don't want to spend a whole lot when they get in, so they still want to stay kind of small. And basically, what I'd recommend is at least a 20-gallon, in my opinion. Now, this Waterbox 10 is great. And if you have a little bit of knowledge, say if you've done some freshwater and you have a little bit of knowledge, yeah, the 10 would work just fine. But I think if you're first starting out and you're trying to do a reef, I think at least 20 gallons is a good, decent middle size for anybody. So obviously this 10 is like 13 by 13, and then the 20-gallon release for the Waterbox is 18 by 18, so it's a pretty decent size. Nothing too big though. I mean, it's definitely a sizable tank to where you can pretty much put it anywhere. But so yeah, that's what I basically recommend. Again, there's much larger tanks to where you get into sumps and stuff, and it's just, if you, by all means, go do that if you think you can definitely handle that. I'll definitely, obviously in this series we're just going to focus on an all-in-one, so we're not going to get into more advanced filtration, but maybe in the future we can start another series on a little bit bigger reef tanks and how to do all that. But so the only other thing I want to talk about in this video today is the filtration. So in this filtration, obviously everything's in the back, and so basically in all-in-one, this is how the filtration really should look and look in any tank. Now you're going to get media with your all-in-one tanks more than likely, and most of that stuff I would say to throw out just depending on what it is. So for example, water box comes with, obviously you got your filter sock. That's fine. That's definitely something you need to put in there for for a fine filter mesh. And polishing the water. So obviously that's the first chamber for this tank. Now the second chamber is where basically all your media is. So for water bugs, for example, they include biomedia, which are their bio balls, and then they got a couple sponges, and then activated carbon. Now, chemical. Also, we know there's mechanical, mechanical, and then you got your biomedia. So there's the three types. The number one you should be worried about is biological all the time, because we're already having our polishing pad basically as our filter sock, so that's already purifying the water as it goes in. And basically your second chamber should basically be 95% biomedia. So basically what I did in my tank was basically fill it up with 95% Chem Matrix. Chem Matrix is basically the best biomedia on the market. So that's definitely the one I'd recommend, no brainer. I mean, there's really no other one you should use besides Matrix. But I did add the bio balls to the very bottom just because I had the space, so might as well. So I added the bio balls, and then I added all matrix all the way to the top basically. And then I left a little bit of room to put one of their sponges at the very top, just to clear up a little bit of debris. And I put that on the top just so I can easily take it out, because the biomedia, you're more than likely never have to be able to take it out unless it gets that clogged to where you might have to rinse it in some tank water. But that shouldn't be a problem for a very long time. But I still will put the sponge at the very top to cap the biomedia, just to have that little sponge there for it will, because that sponge will act as a biological media, but it's not going to be as porous or do its job as the matrix. There's so much bacteria that can live on matrix compared to a sponge, so that's why. But the sponge is basically there just for another kind of take out any large debris, but no large debris should be able to get in there anyways with the filter sock. For how fine that sock is, it's literally going to take in like 99% of the debris that comes in. So really that sponge is almost just acting as another biological media per se. And then the third chamber is where our heater and then obviously our output to shoot out. Now there's nothing that needs to be in there besides obviously your heater, because a reef tank, corals like warmer temperatures, and about 70 degrees is on average is what people do. Again, some tanks are warmer, some tanks are cooler, but for the most part 95% reefs are ran at about 78-80 degrees. So yeah, I think that's it for the tank and filtration video. If you have any questions, you can comment down below. I know there's probably a few things that I probably skipped over that you're wondering, so definitely you can comment down below if you have any other questions, or you can follow me on Instagram at Aquariums, and you can direct message me there. That's totally fine. But other than that, I'll see you guys on episode 2, and that will be all about hardscape and live sand and what you should choose and what you should not do, and we'll get this tank flooded.